Hello, welcome to another edition of Low Code Campfire. This is episode number 137 for March 8, 2024. It's another Open Lines Friday where we talk about, well, anything you want to talk about. But before we get into that, let me do the setup. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plant App, joined by Patrick Anderson, Technical Success Manager for Plant App, and a cast of regulars I see, and perhaps a new face. This is an all skill levels welcome event where we talk about Plant an App, low code, and we just invite you to bring either a problem or a technique or help answer questions, bring something to show, and we all learn something. We do this every Friday at this hour. We have all the past episodes out on YouTube, youtube.com/plantandapp. So you can go back and review the other 136 hours of training content. We run this agenda where we say hello and then go around the campfire, and we always start with first call or any topics that you might have submitted in advance, and make sure that we deal with them up front. But then we take a look at the contributions to our Campfire website, an opportunity to share techniques and put them out for the permanent record so that you can go back and load them when you need them. We take a look at our community website and any feature requests. There's we're have a new feature where we're taking a look at our internal low-code development playbook, and very optimistic we'll get into a couple of those today. And if you want to, we can talk about dark corners and ghost stories, any issues, problems, things that you struggled with, and maybe we could do better so that you don't waste your time on them. After an hour or so, we'll go into our Afterglow segment. That's where we turn the recording off, raise a virtual adult beverage, even though it's morning my time, and just enjoy each other's company for a few more minutes. So do engage, jump in, show and tell. You can use the chat window, but do engage with us. Um, if you have noise going on in the background, we encourage you to mute. You can use this QR code to submit questions and topics in advance, or you can, there's a link in the emails that we send to you that will do the same thing. With all that being said, I will say hello, welcome.
Good morning.
Happy Friday.
It
Good
is.
morning, everyone.
Hello, everybody.
It is a happy Friday. I was pulling my hair out yesterday, so I'm optimistic today is going to be a better day. All right, so we move into first call. Someone show up with a problem that they would like to see solved. Yes, that'd be a great idea. Anybody that has a first call, raise your hand. We're going to start with Ben.
Hello. So this is not so much a problem, just more along the lines of a question if there's documentation for it. We came across an issue setting up some more development machines, and the install of the dependencies were failing because our firewall was blocking a whole bunch of stuff that was trying to be downloaded. So my question is, does Plantain app have any documentation on IP addresses or server names or anything like that that need to be opened up should whoever is doing the install have a firewall that does a lot of blocking? Like what should be whitelisted for an update and install?
So, to my knowledge, and Patrick, you can correct me, to my knowledge, there isn't specific documentation on that. My recommendation would be that if you'll open a support ticket, I'll turn it over to our infrastructure team to get an answer to that. I think we use some content delivery networks for some of that content as well as other things. So it's the short answer is no. I don't have an answer I can just point you to.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, we did see some stuff was coming from like AWS and stuff like that. I want to say like about 3 weeks ago, I had an issue when I was doing the upgrades where three specific files were being blocked, but those were because they were specifically JavaScript files that the firewall was seeing. So they put an exception for those three. But then 3 weeks later, here we are trying to set up two new systems, and like everything was being blocked at this point. They must have changed the firewall and made it even more restrictive. So they came back to ask me like, what can we whitelist to help you out? And I'm like, I have absolutely no clue. And I don't think a list like that exists, but I said, I'll ask. So here I am asking, but I'll put in a ticket. Thank you, Dale.
All right, thanks.
Sorry, Patrick. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, that's okay. I was just going to agree with Dale. I mean, the only web address that comes to mind right away is services.planetapp.com, but yeah, I'm sure it's much more complicated than that.
All right, Don politely raised his hand.
Only because I knew where the button was this time. Thanks, whoever told me. Hopefully it's a quick question, maybe just point me in the right place or a quick demo, but how do you put a dashboard on an existing page? Do you go into the settings of the entity and flip dashboard there, or can you add it in like you can add an action form or action grid on a page by itself?
I think both of those things are possible. If it's an entity page, I would use the switch, but you can put dashboards on things that aren't entity pages as well. So have just a page at random here, and if you go into add module, I think we can add it right here. Plaintiff app dashboard, yeah. So you can add it either.
Okay. I just didn't look far enough.
Right.
Most all of your modules are up at the top, AVT dot, etc., action board, etc. I bet I didn't find that's all it was. Okay.
Good. Oh, goodness. There, now it's letting me out. All right, good question. Along the way, I mean, our dashboards do a great job at as far as they go. I'll point out in the Campfire website, so that's campfire.planetapp.com, that Ben has contributed long ago another way to display metrics that if you can't get the dashboard to display or want to use other techniques, that's an option as well. So, for example, you can use any place that this contribution, any place that you can use a token, can also display a nice dash card. So that's a nice. For example, it looks just like that. That's one of them right there. So it's an alternate way to produce it that just uses a token to get it done. But dashboards are great if the kind of summarization and data access that it's built in to accomplish the work. It's the dashboards themselves will automatically refresh and produce a lot of good content without a lot of work. So there's just a couple different options to produce stuff there.
Cool.
Good. Someone else. Well, you're thinking about whether or not you have one that you'd like to discuss, and we happen to be here on our Campfire website. So I'll let anybody who's new know that if you participate in this particular weekly event, you're welcome to get an invitation to this website and the ability to access the contributions that have been made. So you get a login and the ability to go behind the scenes and see how things are set up. So the value of this website is we've contributed a lot of different things. You can search through them and look on the contributions page and see what things have been contributed. My most recent contribution since we got together last week is this one. I'm going to go and show it to you. So this is if you have JSON coming in from whatever source and you want to look at it in a name value pair kind of way, this will do that. So the advantage, if your JSON is coming in and you don't know, I mean, if you know the structure, you can say, okay, I want the address or I want the address to field, and it's not a problem to use our low code functionality to get to that. But if you don't know the structure, or and you know, particularly I was doing an import from HubSpot the other day, and there were dozens and dozens of properties. The properties were different between each record. Some companies had certain properties, some didn't. And so I just wanted to be able to loop through them and get and take whatever properties are there. I want to manipulate them. So this structure doesn't help me very much for that purpose. This structure does. So for example, if we look at this in a viewer, we end up with a structure like this where you've got an array that has a name and a value and a name and a value. So your this contribution converts it from one format to the other. If you have the sign on, you can get into the workflow that does this. So it accepts as input a JSON string. It has a process that runs, it's actually running some JavaScript to do this flip for us. And so the JavaScript defines a function that converts it to the desired format. It does all the work, so you just call the function with the JSON string and you get a result string out. So first of all, does that make sense to anybody? Is that something that might be useful? If not, just put it in your pocket notes there on the Campfire website. For anybody who's doing JavaScript development and trying to call our execute JavaScript functionality, it might be worth pointing out some of the ways that you link into it. So the input that I'm expecting here is I'm calling it, I'm giving it an input of JSON string, and in this case I'm providing it a default value, an input, so that we can see, so we can work and test this within the workflow interface. But that's the input that it's expecting, JSON string. Inside the JavaScript itself, the place that I'm using JSON string is here. So automatically, without having to do anything, tokens that exist in a workflow are automatically available in this execute JavaScript as a variable name. So it's just useful to know that, so you don't have to pass it or trying to do anything specific or use the bracket notation or anything. It's just right there. And then in terms of getting things out of JavaScript, whatever value you return is placed in the output token. So result string got set here because I called this function, and then we're returning result string, and it goes into result. I am outputting that in my set of outputs. That the output comes out there and it goes into a variable called name value pairs. So that's just kind of part of the way that that's wired. Is that again? I'm trying to start something here. Anybody have a question or a comment, or we'll move on?
Just one quick question, and that is, so that's your workflow. You have an input and an output. So in your form, there's fields in the execute workflow that allows you to set those.
Right. When you call, so on my convert button, let's get it, let it load here. On my convert button, when you create a workflow, it creates an action for you that you can call on. So I added the execute convert JSON to name value pairs action.
Right.
That's the name of the workflow. And it asks, what's my JSON string? And here's the outputs. So I'm passing whatever was in the box to the workflow, and then on an output field, and this just for any newbies here, when it asks for an output field, you give it the name of a field, not the bracket. That you don't want the value of. So we want this is going to create a token called name value pairs, and then continuing the wiring here, we have this field on the form called name value pairs. So it's actually going to set the output is going to be stored here automatically because that was the output of the action. And then update form Ajax says to take any values that and populate them to the form. So we get, when we click the button, it runs the workflow, takes the output, puts it into that field, and then redisplays the field. Good. All right. So we're speeding through here. So I've given you a chance to think about it. Any other first calls before we move on to, well, anything else? One of the things that we mentioned last week, and we've done one of these before, but the low-code development playbooks. So let me clear off some of this stuff so I don't get confused. Internally, our plant and app delivery team is working on a playbook for development. The idea is we want to develop a set of best practices that we adhere to as we're delivering projects for our clients. And it occurs to us that that this group could benefit from this to know what we're thinking. You might not want to do things the way we do, but it might be useful for you to understand how we're doing it and maybe incorporate those. And then the other piece of it is maybe you have opinions that on things that should be best practices for doing low code. So that's the background. And so here we are. We have on our system here, we have two, and I week by week our goal is to talk about two of these. One that is an approved what our development team has arrived at as the right answer, and then a draft where we've come up with things that we're still thinking about it. We're looking for a best practice. So we're going to start with an approved one here. That where the approved one is that we want to set up individual accounts for each developer. So rather than just having a single account that a developer uses, that and that all your developers might use, you set up individual ones. So the why is that important? Well, it enhances security. You can manage access rights, limit if people are no longer part of the project, you can remove their access. So rather than having one main password, It increases accountability so you can see who did what within the system. If you're using our version control system, you can see who committed who did the work and who committed the work to the project. And then error tracking helps when things go wrong. The other thing that so as we're doing these, how do you do it? Well, you can use manage users and create a new user to do that. And you can assign roles to that particular user, whatever rights that they need. I don't know that we've detailed it here. One of the practices that we're using is that just like in any other system, you should be operating under the minimum rights that you need. And so rather than always logging in as a super user with rights to do everything, that we create, if for example, I have rights to use the support system, but I also have rights to develop under our support system. I have a separate account for having rights to develop, so that in the course of my day-to-day, I don't just pop in and make some change on the fly. It's actually, I have to have a conscious effort to go in and convert myself to a developer so that I can to make a change on a screen or something like that. So that's one of the best practices that we've put into our book. I don't think there's any big revelations there, but if you have comments, agreements, disagreements, we would welcome. Okay, we got a thumb. Somebody, Ben found the thumbs up. All right, so we're good. If we get a thumbs up from Ben, we're good. All right, I'm going to move on. So this here's a draft. Drafter, a slightly different screen here, but it gives us the same kind of a layout. So within low code, we have a couple of actions that let you get a hold of data. If you're working with tables that are non-plant and app entities, then your main access point is going to be to run a SQL query. But if you're running a plant and app entity, we create a number of actions. So there's the read all entities, for example, that lets you access data within from a plant and app. So you can use one way. You can use for that. You now have a choice. Do you use a SQL query, or do you use the read all or read action to get something done? And I think if we come down here to the conclusion, maybe this is a good spot to start. It's saying that it really depends. We come to the conclusion that it depends on your specific needs, and SQL query is good for those that need advanced database interactions or that are proficient with SQL. And then read all entities is simpler. So that this is not one of those plays that comes to a specific conclusion that says you should do this. It's giving you, it's just asking you to think about it and do the appropriate thing.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, another consideration here might be that for us to, I think this should note, if it doesn't already, I haven't actually read this one yet, but that the read and read all actions take into consideration permissions, entity permissions, whereas doing SQL will override the entity permissions.
That is a great idea. And so would you mind taking a note that we're going to need to update this draft?
Yes, sure.
That's really important, I think. Um, so Don, you've got your hand up. What do you got?
It's not commenting on the system, but it's sort of a peripheral. What do you? I've used reads and of course SQL queries to get a particular record, and the output is, like if one of the fields is name and the output token is my record, then I can get at name by my record colon name. When you do a read all, how do you get at the various records? What is the nomenclature for getting at record 3 or
Sure.
5? Or
That's a great question. Um, I'm going to go to one of my favorite entities, book. That's one of the ones I started with, and I think you recognize it.
I do.
So we have so we created a book entity. Books have things like properties like name and date published and view count, lots of different properties. When you want to, I'm not going to actually, I don't think I'm actually going to save this, but we'll take a look at the actions that get created. So when we create the act of creating an entity results in what are they? Where are they stored?
Entities?
Thank you. Yes, entities. There's 602 of them here, so yeah, that's a clue. So every we can look for them this way, or we can do search, and probably it makes. I wanted to point out where they were stored, but in this case, we'll say we'll do a search. So the act of creating an entity adds these entity actions to anywhere where you need to consume them, whether that's workflows or APIs or forms. And so there's as you pointed out, there's read book and read all books. Your question is about read all. I'm going to show what you were just talking about. If you want to read a specific book and you give it a record ID of one or some other token, this is the ID that gets read out of the book. And as you could, whatever name you put here as the output token, like book, now you can subsequently refer to the properties book colon and the whatever property, the date published, the name, whatever it is. And so it's a very simple one-to-one relationship when you're doing read book. When you're doing read all books, the output, first of all, it's a slightly different configuration. You have to say which books you want. So you could say something like name, like, and give it an expression. And it asks, it by default has 1,000 records. It just puts a limit in how many records it gets returned. You can put it in a particular order, but the output token, you get to name it, and this is how you refer to it later. So what gets created is described here in this area here. So you can use, it tells you can use books colon JSON, gives you the JSON that got returned. And so if you wanted it in that format, you could, that's one way to access it. So take a look at the JSON that gets returned. But it also creates out the books colon count. That's going to tell you how many books are included in that result. And then tell me this, and the other thing that it's creating is a list of books. So we have, this is really the preferred answer to the question. Books is now a list. And so you can use, we'll actually run this one. Let's find a couple of let's take a look at the couple of the outputs. So I'll go ahead and name this. This is, the name, and since it's creating books as an output token, and it says that we can get the count and the JSON, we'll do that as outputs. So we'll have count as an output and output books count, and we'll also output JSON and books JSON. So this is one way to use it. Let's save and test. So it tells us the count is 2 and the JSON is this content here, which I'll straighten out and make it. So it shows us the IDs and names and all the different properties of the different books, and those are formatted as an array. So if you want a JSON, that's one of the outputs that you can have. The easiest one, the easiest output that comes from this is a list. So just like we have the create list from in our lists and objects, we have create list from JSON or other create list things. This has automatically created a list for us. So now you can, for each, execute actions for each list entry. And so the list name is books, the same thing that came out of your last step. And now you can iterate through the books.
Ah, that makes sense.
And so, for example, if you wanted to gather a list of all of the names, and that's probably the easiest one I can do here. So I'm going to create an update tokens that is create something called names that are what names are. And so that we have a variable called names, and then or a token called names, and then in our behavior for in our action list for this, we will also create an update tokens, and we will say that names gets the value of names, whatever it was before, plus books and I'm will this JSON that we had here just a second ago just to see my fields. So we could pick date published or name or whatever, but I'm going to use name. So at every iteration, we're going through and adding the name of the book to whatever this value was. And so we'll save that. And so for our outputs now, instead of what we had before, we can just say that we're going to say so this workflow now goes and gets whatever books we're interested in and gives a list. So book names are Foundation and Empire and Second Foundation. I could put delimiters in there and clean it up. But yeah, the read all books outputs a list, and then you can manipulate it through execute actions on each list entry.
Very good. Thank you.
Sure. So let's see the reason why we put this into play. it's saying, why do we care? Well, it's different functionality and usage, and it impacts performance and results. So a SQL query lets you allow writing and reading custom SQL queries that are going directly against your database. It's complete control and flexibility, but you've got to understand SQL, and it's ideal for handling complex queries. Oftentimes, you might, for example, the most common case is that you want to join um, your book information with some other information, and so a SQL query would let you join to a different table and get related information. And other complex queries might be to do counts or averages or maximum or minimum values. Some of those queries get quite involved. So if you need to do more than just get a book or get a list of books, but rather you need more complex scenarios, then SQL query is better. But for the if you use the read or read all actions, it gets the data directly from your database. It's straightforward to use. You don't have to understand SQL, and will handle the filtering, sorting, paging, and then it's faster and simpler if you just have basic needs. So this is the spot where, as Patrick pointed out, the permissions come into play. If you use read or read all, and the user doesn't have permissions according to the entity definition. So looking at that real quickly, when you're editing as a designer, you have this access to permissions, and you can say whether people can view, can add, can edit, can delete. So read would have to do with the can view functionality. And so books is set up that all users can read all entries in this table. So there's no limitation. But if we limited it to that only managers, for example, could read records, that we didn't give general users the right to read things, then read and read all would enforce that limitation and prevent people from getting data back from that. If you use SQL, the developer, are responsible for enforcing the security that you need. If you use read and read all, then we're responsible for enforcing that security according to the way you've laid it out. And then there's kind of a slightly, as a low-code developer, you might be very comfortable with SQL with both methods, and so using either is fine for you. But if you're developing for somebody who isn't a SQL developer, choosing the low-code option might be clearer for them to take advantage of. So yeah, using the right tool. So with that, any feedback on which you use, or how else you might advise us to modify this best practice? All right. Well, just because we spent some time on it, it's helped us. We've realized that we've fallen short and need to put security into that. Have we sparked anything yet, or shall I just keep talking? Okay. So We had a support case this week that it brought up a new known issue, and I've just reported it to development. But there's no reason I thought it might be useful to share that this is one of our known issues, so that if you encounter it, you don't spend too much time on it. You know how to get around it. So let's see if I can find all the pieces. We have an entity, it's a horrible name for thing, console 3550 Boolean, except that it relates to a particular support ticket, so it helps me find it, but you hopefully won't name your things this way. We have 3 properties on here. There's the name of the property, just it's an arbitrary name, and then we have 2 Boolean values. One is called isBig, one is called isTall. They're nonsense. All that we need to know is that they're Boolean properties. And then if we go back and look at some data that we have in here, we can open up the form, take a look at the data. Currently, we have just 1 record in here, so we'll be creating a new record. So I've got a workflow. It doesn't have any inputs. The output is the new record number, but we're using the create new action to create a record. And so we're just giving it a name, no is big, no is tall, getting the record name, record number out of it. So this is going to work exactly like you would expect. We'll save and test it, and it's going to run, and it's going to create a record. The new record number is 148. And so if we go look at the listing and refresh, we'll see record 148. It has the value that we expect for the name. Is big and is tall are blank because we didn't provide any value. So in the database, I believe these are null. All right, so here's where it gets, here's where we get it under an issue. I have a automation job. So this symptom only shows up under an automation job. I don't have any trigger for it. I'm going to edit the job and just show you what's going to execute when we run the job. So a disabled trigger, got a lot of disabled actions here. I am going to turn on this action. So what's going to run when we do this is it's going to create one with test set 1. It's I'm going to try and do the same thing we just did in the workflow, not provide any values. And someone with a question or just all right, so I run this thing and it's running and we get a failure. So we get a message that it's complaining about is big. It says it failed to parse it and doesn't know what to do with it. So that's the bug. This action, create new on Boolean, it doesn't, you can't pass it a blank value. If you passed it a true or a false, it would be very happy, but if you pass it blanks, it doesn't work. And then the same is true with if you tried to use the update console action. Where you're trying to pass it particular record and you're trying to pass it without a value, that it doesn't do that. You actually have to pass it as a true or a false value in order to make it work. So this is something we've reported to development. Workarounds are reasonably easy. You have to actually give it a value and it will work. It's kind of inconvenient the way it is, though, because when if you were to add a the Boolean value to an existing entity. And that job, you've got a job existed. Now the job will begin to fail because the new Boolean is big or is tall isn't being provided. And so until you edit the job is going to fail. So it's an annoying thing that one of our users found. All right. You guys are quiet today. Anybody have any new feature requests that were added and or want to advocate for one?
I do.
Yeah, that one on top is new, Dale.
All right, Jen spoke first though, so I'm going to get her to talk, and then Mark, you'll.
Okay. Just like in the calendar display, if there could be more ability to control the display, well, basically what I really want to try to do is put a background to the cell based on if it has something in it, just, custom color, or, font size or something, so that we can get to display a little bit nicer instead of just kind of the one thing. We don't really have many controls over how the calendar is displayed. I'm just going to use JavaScript though on a computed field.
Yep.
Event, for myself. But anyway, it'd be kind of
Yeah,
nice.
from a low code perspective, I think that's an area where we have issues. I think in the grid view, there's this one about adding classes to grids so that they're easier to style. But so that's kind of the same thing for calendar, if I've got that right. So yes, I think that would be a good one. Now, Mark, you said. I like this.
How are you replying? Yeah, so
No, I'm trying to just bring it up here.
yes, I like it when I can bring an end to the action stack with the actions to say and stop execution. But then there's times I need to say, oh, I'm changing my mind and I needed to keep going. And so then I have to recreate the action. And I thought, can't we just toggle this? Toggle the and continue or and stop.
Makes a lot of sense.
I definitely agree.
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice if it was just one action and just have a little checkbox in there that says, stop,
Yep.
or uncheck it if you want it to continue.
That's where I'm going.
Fewer actions in the list.
Yep. And like you, Mark, I've had a lot of situations where I do something and I'm like, for an initial debug, I just want it to stop. And then after I get my answer, then I'm like, all right, well, I want that still there, but this time I want it to keep going.
Right. And then you have
And like
to
you said, you
build
have to then, either conditionally false it out and then add another action that does the condition, the continue or whatever.
You got it.
So I think just making a guess, Dale, you might be going here to show the stop execution action, maybe.
Yeah, I was trying to illustrate what we're talking about. Just
okay. I mean, there is this. So there is the stop execution action, but but that doesn't help you if you if you have a stop execution action already and you want to switch it to a continue. So
Yeah,
it's still the
once
yeah
used, you're stuck
yeah
with it.
yeah the toggle should is definitely would be an excellent
So we have a number of these and continue, and then there's the and stop. So
That might be a nice thing to kind of clean this up, is all of these that have and stop and continue, if it's possible to make them all like a toggle check on it. Then instead of having two actions for each one, we'd have one with an option.
so become an initialize form action with a stop checkbox.
Right. So the continue would be kind of the default, you know,
Mhm.
and then if you want it to stop, you just say, stop. And then at that point, it won't process beyond.
So, Patrick, thank you for chiming in, because this is a dark corner for me. I did not know that stop execution was an action. I've never had cause to
No.
use it. It's just stop here.
it can
So,
be useful. Yeah.
so right now, I mean, you could always use the end continue version of something, following it by a stop, so that if you want to remove the stop, you can do that. Or and that's probably the technique that I would use until we clean this up. But I mean, there's limitations to that. They would have to you'd have to duplicate the condition of this, so that it doesn't so that it only executes in the same way. I like the simplicity of a checkbox here, or a true false condition. As a matter of fact, I would love to see it as an evaluated expression, perhaps a true false stop execution with the ability to flip it to an expression, because it's always
Ooh, that'd be nice.
I get frustrated with when we have checkboxes and then you want things to be different based on token values.
Why don't you add that?
Question on, oops, sorry. You first, Mark.
I was saying, Dale, go ahead and comment and add that right in there. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, with regards to the stop execute, what version of Plantain app did that appear in? Because if I'm not mistaken, that's not an earlier version.
No, that's later.
Because I don't think right now, like where we're at, we have, I could be wrong, but I'm checking now, but I don't think we have that because we're on a bit of an older version. So that might be
It was like
later
2.3 or
on.
2.4, I think, where that came in.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, so just a caveat to that stop part that's available from a certain version onward.
So that's my reply to that. And if you haven't done it, there is, if you go hover the thumbs up and click it, it will add your vote to this. So if you're inclined to, if you like this, and I saw there was a couple of yeses, I'm just going to put the link on there. You're welcome to bump the count on that. So, but I think that's a great one. And from our, I don't know. Okay, so now I'm interested. Let's look behind this for a second. So we have initialize and continue, and then let's say see if we can find initialize form stop. Just curious, if we were to export this, there is in it action form is its internal name. And this is in an action form and continue. So we actually have, I think this is probably two different code points that we could probably get rid of some code is what I'm saying by just adding, if we were to clean this up.
Could we use that process to convert from one to the other?
Yes, although I don't know that that's how useful that is, but yes, if you had if you had this, for example, this is the continue one, and we were to copy that, whoops, and import. If, I mean, the answer is yes, you could do that. But it's almost, I think you're kind of setting yourself up for possible mistake, right? So, you're probably better off to just do it through the interface.
Okay.
Because you could forget to do the title or give it a bad title, or who knows. Cool. Okay. We've got a very short amount of time, so I'm going to say if you have anything else, now is the time. Just jump in. And if not, then I am going to invite you to our Afterglow segment. We'll continue that in just as soon as the recording stops here. But thanks for joining. I hope you've found value in participating in Code Campfire. Invite all your friends and bring marshmallows next time. See you next week.